On a game show, the host asked my mom, "What's 1 plus 1?" My mom didn't hesitate. "It equals 3. Everyone froze. My family had joined this show to raise money for my astronomical medical bills. Answer 10 questions correctly, and they'd win $5 million. After struggling through 9 questions, the host took pity and asked a softball question. This prize money was my lifeline. But my mom, a PhD in mathematics, deliberately answered it wrong. I bolted upright in my hospital bed, chest tight with pain. The host recovered quickly, plastering on a smile. Dr. Lily Smith is a mathematics PhD. Perhaps in unexplored mathematical fields, 1 plus 1 can equal 3. However, the question I just asked is very simple. You only need to think like a first grader. But my mom blinked and said firmly, 1 plus 1 equals 3. The host's expression darkened. My brother held up 2 fingers, waving them frantically in front of Mom's face. "Mom, just answer one more question correctly, and we can get the prize money for Chloe's surgery." This isn't the time for jokes. Dad was sweating bullets too. "Honey, did you mishear the question? Or did you misspeak?" But no matter how Dad and my brother pleaded, Mom stuck to her answer, 1 plus 1 equals 3. The audience exploded. Is this mother insane? This has to be scripted. What mother would want her own child to die? Each question had a 10-minute time limit. As the countdown neared its end, I begged the doctor to help me video call the show. The production team connected immediately. My pale, weak face appeared on the big screen. The crowd gasped in sympathy. The host's eyes reddened with emotion. At 16, I'd been diagnosed with a malignant heart tumor and was in critical condition every moment. The only hope for my survival was this prize money. The host was frantic. "There are only 3 minutes left on the countdown. If you answer incorrectly, all your family's efforts will be wasted." To qualify for this show, my whole family had stayed up for 3 months memorizing the question bank. They'd barely made it through 9 questions, and now Mom was spouting nonsense on the 10th. I spoke carefully. "Mom, the prize is $5 million. My treatment only costs $3 million. I won't take a penny of what's left. And when I recover, I'll work hard and give you every paycheck to show my gratitude." The crowd murmured sympathetically. Mom's eyes welled up too. With 10 seconds left on the countdown, Mom raised her hand to indicate she wanted to change her answer. I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe Mom had just been joking with everyone. "I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. 1 plus 1 should equal." I held my breath. Mom surveyed the room, then suddenly smiled. 1 plus 1 equals 1. The countdown ended. The $5 million on the screen instantly disappeared. Then Mom said leisurely, "Sorry, I was careless and said it wrong. 1 plus 1 should equal 2. But the countdown had ended. My surgery funds were gone. Sharp pain shot through my chest. I nearly blacked out from the agony. My brother lost control, shouting, "Mom, what are you doing? Chloe's going to die." Mom just calmly pointed at the screen. "Look, isn't Chloe suffering? You know she's suffering and you deliberately answered wrong." My brother's eyes were bloodshot. "You knew perfectly well that if you answered correctly she could live. This is all your fault." Mom suddenly raised her voice. "My fault? I didn't do it on purpose. Of course I know 1 plus 1 equals 2, but I was just careless." "Careless?" My eyes widened in shock. How could anyone carelessly answer 1 plus 1 wrong? Mom knew perfectly well that without the prize money for surgery, I would die immediately. Why would she? Amid everyone's confusion and anger, Mom raised an eyebrow and turned to look at my brother. "Carson, do you remember? On your middle school entrance exam, you lost a full 5 points because you wrote 1 plus 1 equals 3. Because of those 5 points, you couldn't get into the top middle school. When I criticized you then, you had the nerve to talk back, saying you were just careless and would be more careful next time. Today I'm showing you exactly what kind of consequences a moment of carelessness can cause." Mom pointed at the big screen. "Take a good look and remember what Chloe looks like right now, covered in sweat from pain. This is the consequence of carelessness. Today I'm using your sister's suffering to teach you a lesson." Everyone exploded. I stared in disbelief. My brother was already a college junior. Mom was still holding a grudge about his middle school entrance exam. Dad was furious. "Do you realize Chloe's about to die? If you wanted to teach Carson a lesson, couldn't you have picked another time?" Mom muttered impatiently. "Doctors always exaggerate. Chloe's so young, she can definitely hold on longer than other people. Carson's careless habits should have been corrected long ago. Gentle methods don't work, so I'm giving him a lesson he'll remember in his bones." I could barely breathe. The nurse gripped my hands tightly, her eyes full of pity. Dad roared that he'd fight Mom to the death. Mom raised her hand to block him. "What's the rush? Doesn't the show have one more bonus round? If we answer the next question correctly, we won't get $5 million, but we can still get $3 million. That's enough for Chloe's surgery." With the host's intervention, Dad and my brother finally calmed down. Mom looked at the big screen, her gaze tender. Chloe, hang in there a little longer. Mom just wanted to take this opportunity to teach your brother a lesson. I promise I'll answer the next question correctly. I bit my lip hard, forcing back tears. Mom, I know you love me, but for the next question, can Dad or Carson answer instead? Mom's expression froze. Dad and my brother were afraid Mom would pull another stunt and strongly supported my suggestion. But unfortunately, during the earlier rounds, they'd already used up their chances to answer. So Mom had to go up again. This last question determined whether I lived or died. The studio fell silent. The host was sweating as he frantically searched the question bank, finally selecting the simplest possible question. Ms. Lily Smith, what's your birthday? I relaxed, looking at the host with gratitude. Mom hit the answer button without hesitation, but said, Host, I'd like to use my lifeline. Phone a friend. The room erupted. How could someone not remember their own birthday? A wave of panic hit me. Since I got sick, Mom had been getting more and more gray hair. I'd heard that middle-aged people under prolonged mental stress could easily develop dementia. Had Mom's condition already deteriorated this badly? Tears blurred my vision. My hands trembled. Mom chose Dad as her lifeline. Dad looked helpless. Your birthday is January 8th. Mom nodded and pressed the answer button again, but was suddenly stopped by my anxious brother. Mom, did you hear clearly? What date is it exactly? Repeat it. At my brother's insistence, Mom repeated January 8th, 3 times before being allowed to press the answer button. But Mom still didn't speak. Seeing Mom's nervousness, I endured the sharp pain in my heart and tried to comfort her. Don't be afraid, Mom. Just answer this one question and it'll all be over. Mom smiled at me, but her answer plunged me into ice-cold despair. My birthday is January 9th. The air froze instantly. The host immediately tried to smooth things over. Your husband said your birthday is January 8th. Ms. Smith must have misspoken. Please answer again. But Mom's gaze was resolute. I didn't misspeak. I said it wrong on purpose. The audience exploded. My heart hurt so badly I couldn't straighten up. The nurse tried to end the video call, but I stopped her. Mom, why did you deliberately answer wrong again? My voice shook with pain. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but her tone was aggrieved. It's all your father's fault. Not just Dad. Everyone was stunned. Dad had told her the correct answer. What had he done wrong? Under the host's questioning, Mom wiped her tears and revealed the truth. A few weeks ago was our 20th wedding anniversary and my birthday. But Sean actually got the date wrong. San, you said my birthday was January 9th, so now I'm making it come true. Dad's veins bulged with anger. I did accidentally get your birthday wrong. But those few days I was working consecutive all-nighters to earn medical expenses for Chloe. I was completely exhausted and confused, so I got the date wrong. I apologized afterward, and worked 3 more weeks of all-night delivery shifts to buy you a gold bracelet to make up for it. Isn't that enough? Mom said nothing, just bowed her head and wiped her tears. The countdown kept ticking down. The burning pain in my chest had become unbearable, cold sweat soaking the bedsheets. Dad kept begging Mom to give the correct answer, so they could get the money and rush me into surgery. But Mom remained unmoved. I was completely heartbroken. So my life was just a tool for Mom to teach my family lessons. 3 minutes left on the countdown. Using all my strength, I personally ended the live stream. The doctors and nurses in the room all had red eyes. My voice was barely a whisper, but utterly determined. Doctor, I want to sign an organ donation agreement. Also, after I die, I want my mom to witness the entire organ removal process. Mom, don't you love teaching people lessons? Then today, I'll teach you one too. The second I finished signing, excruciating pain engulfed my entire body. Everything went black. In the last second before I lost consciousness, I heard Mom roaring on the show. What are you all panicking about? Chloe's illness isn't new. How could she suddenly die just like that? Dad was forced to his knees before Mom in front of a national audience, begging forgiveness and promising never to forget another important date. Mom finally gave the correct answer in the last second before the countdown ended. But it was already too late. In the emergency room, doctors frantically pressed on my chest. But my heartbeat grew weaker and weaker. The attending physician shouted, "We need to operate now." But the prize money hadn't arrived yet. My account only had a few $100s. Hospital policy only allowed standard emergency care. As consciousness faded, I seemed to see Mom. Mom, you knew I could die any second. Why did you keep deliberately answering wrong and wasting time? Mom, don't you love me? The doctor's CPR grew more forceful. I could almost hear my ribs cracking. Mom, I really can't hold on much longer. If you could just come see me one last time, I wouldn't blame you. But I waited and waited. Shot after shot of epinephrine was injected into my veins, yet my breathing still gradually weakened. The monitor beeped. Hospital policy, no money, no surgery. The doctor called the production team furiously. Didn't they answer correctly? Why hasn't the prize money arrived? But the production team was helpless too. We wanted to transfer the money directly to the hospital account, but her mother insisted on cash. They're probably rushing to the hospital with the cash now. The breath I'd been barely holding on to finally gave out. My heart monitor flatlined. Then I heard my family arguing. Chloe's hanging by a thread. Why did you insist on cash? Mom said self-righteously. 3 years ago you got scammed out of $200 online. Online payments are so dangerous, and you still haven't learned? Cash is safest. Today I'm teaching you a good lesson. Dad was frantic, rushing forward. Fine. Cash is safe. But what about Chloe? Every second she waits puts her in more danger. Mom said reluctantly, stop talking. If Chloe's in danger, it's because you cursed her. She was fine this morning. How could something happen this afternoon? In the emergency room, the doctor was pulling a white sheet over my face. Oblivious, Mom pushed open my hospital room door. Chloe, Mom brought the money. The silence in the hospital room was heavier than the suitcase of cash Lily Smith had just slammed onto the bedside table. Chloe, Mom brought the money. Lily's voice was bright, artificial, piercing the somber atmosphere like a jagged knife. Look, $3 million in cash. I told the bank manager he needed to learn efficiency, made him count it twice. That's why I was late. A good lesson for him. She patted the suitcase, then looked at the bed. The white sheet was pulled up. The contours of a human body were visible underneath, but there was no rise and fall of the chest. Lily's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then re-hardened. She let out a scoff. Oh, stop it. You and your father and Carson. Is this the new tactic? Trying to scare me because of the game show? Get up, Chloe. The money is here. You can have your surgery. She reached out to pull the sheet down. Don't touch her. The voice didn't sound like my father. It sounded like something ancient and broken. Dad was standing in the corner, his back pressed against the wall as if he were trying to merge with it, to disappear from this reality. Sean, don't start, Lily snapped, her hand hovering over the sheet. We don't have time for melodrama. The doctor said. The doctor called time of death at 4:02 p.m. The attending physician said. He stepped forward, blocking Lily's path. He was a tall man, usually composed, but his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. You arrived at 4:14 p.m. Lily blinked. She looked at her watch. That's only 12 minutes. 12 minutes doesn't matter. Biology isn't that precise. Just start the machine again. Use the defibrillator. I have the money. I'll pay double. She frantically unzipped the suitcase. Bundles of $100 bills spilled out onto the sterile floor. Buy the best equipment. Wake her up. Mrs. Smith, the doctor said, his voice ice cold. She is not a machine. Her heart didn't stop because of a glitch. It stopped because it ran out of time. The time you wasted arguing about a calendar date. Lily froze. Her eyes darted around the room, landing finally on Carson. My brother was sitting in the chair next to the bed, holding my cold hand under the sheet. He wasn't crying. He was staring at Lily with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. She's dead, Mom, Carson whispered. Chloe is dead. No, Lily shook her head, a nervous tick developing in her cheek. That's impossible. I calculated the odds. She had at least 48 hours. The doctor said critical, not immediate. Doctors always exaggerate to drive up costs. It's a negotiation tactic. She lunged for the bed, ripping the sheet back. My face was pale, eyes closed, mouth slightly open. There was no pain anymore. Just a terrifying stillness. Lily stared. She poked my cheek. It was already cooling. Chloe, she asked. Then louder. Chloe, stop this right now. I admit I was a little stubborn about the birthday, okay? Lesson learned. Now wake up. She grabbed my shoulders and began to shake my corpse. Get your hands off her. Carson roared. He launched himself from the chair, tackling our mother. They crashed into the pile of money, sending bills flying like confetti. You killed her. Carson screamed, pinning Lily to the ground. You killed her to teach me a lesson about middle school math. You killed her to teach Dad a lesson about a calendar. You are a murderer. Security burst in. They pulled Carson off. Lily sat amidst the scattered millions, her hair disheveled, looking not at her dead daughter, but at the money on the floor. I didn't. She mumbled, her voice trembling for the first time. I didn't calculate for this. The funeral home refused to take us. The story had gone viral within minutes of the live stream ending. The hashtag #mathmurderer was trending worldwide. People were gathering outside the hospital with signs. But before my body could be moved, there was one final piece of business. The doctor returned to the room with a clipboard. He looked at Lily, who was sitting in a chair, catatonic, while Dad packed the money back into the suitcase with numb, robotic movements. Mrs. Smith, the doctor said. Chloe signed an organ donation agreement immediately before she passed. Lily looked up, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Organ donation. See? She's still useful. She's helping people. That's my good girl. There is a condition. The doctor cut her off. She invoked a rare clause. A specific request for the witnessing of the procurement. Witnessing? Dad asked, his voice hoarse. Chloe requested that her mother, Dr. Lily Smith, be present in the operating room during the explant surgery. She must watch the removal of the heart, liver, and kidneys. If she refuses, the donation is voided. Lily recoiled. Absolutely not. That's barbaric. I don't like blood. I'm a mathematician, not a butcher. Then the organs go to waste, the doctor lied smoothly, and the 4 people waiting for them die. And the press, who are currently camped outside, will know that not only did you kill your daughter, you denied her dying wish to save others. Lily's vanity was her Achilles heel. She straightened her blouse. She looked at the camera flashing in her mind, the court of public opinion. Fine, she said, sniffing. If it's what she wanted, I'll view it. It's just anatomy. Biology is just complex geometry. They scrubbed her in. They didn't let her stand in the observation gallery. They put her right next to the table. I wasn't there, obviously. I was gone. But I can imagine the scene. It was the lesson I had designed for her. The bright lights. The smell of cauterized flesh. The sound of the rib spreader cranking open. A mechanical, grinding noise that no amount of calculus could explain away. Lily stood there. She tried to look away, but the nurse, the one who had held my hand while I died, whispered, "Watch. You wanted to teach lessons about consequences? Watch the consequence." Lily saw the heart. My heart. It was enlarged, dark, and still. The surgeon cut the vessels. Snip. That's the aorta, the surgeon said dryly. The main supply line. You cut the supply line of money, we cut the supply line of blood. Lily gagged. Her knees buckled. Stand up. The nurse hissed, gripping her elbow. Look at it. It's just 1 + 1, right? 1 heart minus 1 heart equals 0. When they lifted the organ out of my chest, leaving a gaping, bloody cavern, Lily finally broke. She didn't scream. She let out a low, animalistic whine. She tried to back away, slipping on the slick floor, falling onto her knees in a puddle of antiseptic and runoff. I get it, she sobbed, curled into a ball. I get it, I get it, I get it. But the surgery wasn't over. It took 4 hours. She wasn't allowed to leave for a single second. The fallout was nuclear. Lily wasn't charged with murder. The law is tricky regarding delaying aid, but she was charged with child endangerment and negligence. The university where she held tenure fired her within 24 hours. The dean sent a public letter stating that Dr. Smith's understanding of logic is fundamentally incompatible with human ethics. Dad divorced her. It wasn't a messy battle. He simply packed his bags, took the remaining money, which ironically, the game show let them keep as a condolence, though it felt like blood money, and moved to a small apartment across the city. He donated half to the cancer ward and used the rest to pay for Carson's tuition and therapy. Carson changed his name. He dropped out of his junior year, took a year off to hike the Appalachian Trail. Something he'd always wanted to do but Lily forbade because walking is an inefficient use of kinetic energy. Lily was left alone in the big house. The silence should have been her paradise. No one to interrupt her calculations. No one to get dates wrong. No one to answer questions incorrectly. But the house was haunted by numbers. She started seeing them everywhere. The digital clock on the microwave. The calendar on the wall. The number of steps on the staircase. January 9th. She became obsessed with correcting the past. She filled notebooks with equations, trying to prove that her logic on the game show had been sound. Variable A, panic, plus variable B, lesson, equals outcome C, betterment. Why did it equal death? Where was the error in the formula? She stopped paying bills online because she was teaching the electric company a lesson about patience. The power was cut. She refused to buy groceries because the prices were statistically improbable. She began to starve. 6 months after my death, Dad came to the house to sign the final papers for the sale of the property. He found the windows covered in newspaper. The walls were scrawled with charcoal. 1 + 1 is equal to 2. 1 + 1 is equal to 2. 1 + 1 is equal to 2. Written thousands of times. Lily was sitting in the middle of the living room floor. She was thin, her hair gray and matted. She was holding a calculator, punching in numbers furiously. "Lily," Dad said softly. She looked up. Her eyes were wild, unfocused. "San, I found the variable." She scrambled up, shoving the calculator in his face. It was the time dilation. If the host had spoken 15% faster, and if the traffic lights had been synchronized, I would have had an extra 180 seconds. In that time frame, the outcome changes. Dad looked at her with pity. Not love. Not even anger anymore. Just the pity one feels for a rabid dog. "The house is sold, Lily. You have to leave. Leave? She laughed. I can't leave. I have to solve this. If I solve it, she comes back. That's how math works. It's reversible. If the equation balances, the result resets. She's not coming back, Dad said, placing the divorce papers on the table. 1 + 1 = 2, Lily. You plus your ego equals 0. You have nothing. He walked out. She screamed after him, reciting the quadratic formula as a curse. 3 years passed. Carson graduated. He became a social worker. He worked with children of narcissistic parents. He was good at it. He knew the signs. Dad remarried. A kind woman who worked at a bakery. She didn't know calculus, but she knew how to bake warm bread and she knew her husband's birthday. They visited my grave every Sunday. Lily Smith became a ghost story in the neighborhood. She lived in a dilapidated studio apartment on the edge of town, living off a meager pension. She was known as the calculator lady. She would stand at bus stops, yelling at the drivers that their schedules were mathematically inefficient. She would go to the grocery store and scream at the cashier if the change was off by a penny. But the true horror was her nights. She had a recurring nightmare. She was on the game show stage. The lights were blinding. I was in the hospital bed on the screen. The host would ask, "What is 1 + 1?" In the dream, Lily would scream, 2. It's 2. It's 2. But no sound would come out. Or worse, her mouth would move against her will saying, 3, 4, a million. And she would watch me die. Over and over again. Every night. One winter evening, a pipe burst in her apartment building. The water was rising. The landlord pounded on doors, telling everyone to evacuate. Lily was in her room. She heard the banging. "Open up. Emergency," the landlord shouted. Lily said a disk. She was shivering. The water was seeping under the door. "Why should I open it?" she muttered to herself. "He's rude. He didn't say please. He needs to learn a lesson about politeness." The water rose. It was freezing cold. If I open the door now, I reinforce his bad behavior, she reasoned, her breath visible in the air. I will wait 5 minutes. The lesson will be internalized. She watched the clock. Tick, tick, tick. Her chest felt tight. Her left arm went numb. She recognized the symptoms. She had read the medical journals. Myocardial infarction. A heart attack. She reached for the phone. Her fingers were trembling. She dialed 911. "Emergency," the operator said. "What is your location?" Lily opened her mouth to give the address. But a voice in her head, my voice perhaps, or just the echo of her own cruelty, whispered, "Are you sure?" She remembered telling Carson that doctors exaggerate. She remembered telling Dad that urgency is a sign of weakness. "Ma'am," the operator asked, "are you there?" Lily gasped for air. Pain radiated through her jaw. Lily stammered. "I need to verify." "Ma'am, do you have an emergency? Is this efficient?" Lily wheezed. "If I call, and it's just indigestion, I waste tax dollars. I should wait 10 minutes to be sure." "Ma'am, if you have chest pain, we need to send someone now." Lily dropped the phone. She slumped onto the wet floor. The cold water soaked her clothes. 1 + 1. She whispered. She looked at the ceiling. The water stain looked like a 0. She had spent her life trying to teach the world a lesson. In the end, she taught herself the hardest one of all. She waited. She waited to be sure. She waited for the lesson to sink in. And by the time she decided she was ready to be saved, the countdown had already ended. Epilogue, the sum of parts. They found her 2 days later. Carson went to identify the body. He stood behind the glass. He didn't look sad. He looked relieved. He signed the paperwork. The coroner handed him a plastic bag with her personal effects. It contained a cheap wristwatch, a wet notebook, and a single crumpled photograph. It was a picture of me, taken when I was 7 years old. I was holding a math test. I had scored a 100%. Lily was standing behind me, her hand on my shoulder, smiling. On the back of the photo, in shaky, water-stained ink, she had written, "She got it right." Carson walked out of the morgue and into the sunlight. He tossed the notebook into the nearest trash can. He kept the photo. He met Dad at the park. They sat on a bench near the playground. "Is it done?" Dad asked. "It's done," Carson said. They watched a young mother helping her toddler climb the slide. The toddler slipped and bumped his knee. He started to cry. The mother didn't scold him. She didn't tell him to look at the other kids to learn a lesson. She didn't lecture him about the physics of friction and gravity. She just picked him up, kissed his knee, and held him. "It's okay," the mother said softly. "I've got you." Carson took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and pine. "Dad." So. "What's 1 + 1? Dad smiled, a genuine, crinkling smile that reached his eyes. "Whatever you want it to be, kid. As long as we're together." The nightmare was over. The equation was finally balanced.